for so long that it actually hardens it. It gets almost like a rock. Well, how many have ran into a grease that have worked with grease? Have ran into grease, but you couldn't hardly get to take grease. Had to change out the grease, that grease fitting or that grease zerk. That's the reason, because it hasn't seen grease in a long time, and it is allowed to harden. Now, lubrication is a slippery substance placed between two moving solid surfaces. Lubrication provides 6 general functions. Now, here's the other thing. Now, this is exaggerated, of course. You'd have to get highly magnified in order to see that type of surface that you're lubricating. However, there's one thing that needs to be taken into account. Do we have a net zero fit on bearings and stuff, or is there a slight clearance in there? So we got a clearance in there, right? It's not clearance, but clearance. So why is there a clearance?
Allow for the lubricant.
So allow for the lubricant, and depending on the viscosity determines how much clearance it needs in the grease, right? Because if clearance has a real low viscosity, he wants less clearance in there. Or clearance is going to have a problem with his bearings because of his clearance.
Now you're struggling.
Dalton, would I do that?
Yes.
But I'm good at it. However, we see all the different things that lubrication can do for us. And how many have had a machine surface that you sprayed some WD-40 or some other type of lubricant on just to prevent that nasty 4-letter word? Begins with an R, it ends with a T.
Rust.
I got a question for you. You talk about oils. Will we cover the oil that goes into the pumpkin or manual transmission?
Depends on which manual transmission. No, not all of them are gear oil manual transmissions. New ones use automatic transmission fluid.
Yeah, and a variety of that.
And why does it, but you know what I'm talking about, why does it stink? It's got a real strong.
It's got a real pungent odor to it. It's additives they put in. That's severe duty in those differentials. Transmission, they get heavy duty, but the differential, transfer cases, well, transfer cases, some of them are power steering fluid. I haven't seen motor oil in them yet, but I've seen gear oil to transmission fluid in transfer cases, depending on how new and how old. You can't say the rear end lube for the transmissions in the newer trains, because any of them's got aluminum body on. Most of them has aluminum body, has transmission fluid or motor oil in. Now, the foreign wannabe cars, they take and put that motor oil in there. I guess the fellers don't know any better. I don't know, you know. Just messing with you, Alex. But some of those transmissions do use motor oil.
Some of your cars don't even have dipsticks to check your transmission fluid.
VW doesn't.
Mine don't either.
BMW doesn't.
Huh?
BMW doesn't.
My Cobalt
Yeah,
doesn't have
pick
it.
the car up to fill it and check it.
Yeah, she's got a plug and take out.
Well, I mean, if you bought one of the newer Camaros before they stopped making them, you had to take and actually lift the body off to take and change the motor. You took the K-member loose and pulled the motor transmission down. You literally lift the body up off of it. You can't pull the motor up out of through the hood.
Huh.
That's the easy way.
What's the easy way?
Taking the body.
Because unless you could take the motor apart, you're not pulling it up through the hood. Then once you take it back to the garage.
F-150 is the same way.
Well, if you
You
get,
got
well, especially if you got diesel. My old one, I can pull it.
Let's see, what was it, 04 with the 5.4 Triton?
Yeah, the 5.4.
Yeah. Got to pick the cab up on them a little bit. Not enough room for them to come forward and come up out.
I have to check my Expedition, it's got the 5.4 in.
Yeah, it's just back up under the dash. My father-in-law just changed one in as well.
Now, I got a 4.632 valve, that's an impressive looking beast. The Cobra engine, I got that sitting in storage. Just waiting to work on that. haven't had the time or Mr. Jones's money to start on it. All right, so here's an exaggerated view of unlubricated surfaces. And when I say exaggerated, most surfaces that are machined and polished correctly that are required lubrication won't be this jagged unless you got into some extensive magnification. All right?
If you're that accurate, I don't think the surface will look like that.
I agree with you, Dalton, but again, they've exaggerated this. I mean, there is some, abnormality when you machine, it doesn't cut as clean as you like, but that's the reason they do a polishing effect. And what's so funny, Mr. Webster? Well, make us laugh. Come on now.
It's just a hell of a
All right. You don't want to embarrass anybody, that's fine. We still love y'all. Now, we're getting into bearings, and this is actually looks like a bushing. They call it a plain bearing, I call it bushings. That one block we have over there actually has brass bushings in. So if we were to run that, that actually has little caps that you screw to the top of the block that you put a oil down in, and it actually create a little reservoir. Inside the bushings, if they were machined correctly, they actually put a little oil galley, or just a little groove in there that will allow for the oil to pass around the bushing and around the shaft. Then, I don't know who came up with it, who invented it, but it's pretty nifty. They had what they call oil light. It was an oil impregnated bushing. I'm sure you've probably seen it, John. Maybe. But you could actually press it and actually watch the oil try to come out of it some. But it had oil impregnated in it, and you could also drill it and then add oil to it. But real good stuff, and it wasn't that expensive. So again, we still need a certain amount of clearance. Clearance does with the clearance in order to have oil to get around there to lubricate properly. Here we go, lubricated, unlubricated. You see the wear that starts happening. Now, these wear areas they're showing, there had to be bearings or something in there rubbing in order to create that type of wear. And some of these Thompson rods that use what they call a roller pillar block bearing, where they actually have sleeves that circle around and have ball bearings that goes in through to create a guide of sorts, will actually have grooves like that if they're not lubricated, they will cause that type of wear. And then others they actually use those type of bearings to go over a hardened piece of profile to actually create a surface to run on with lubrication. Now, generally in this case, it'll be a higher end type of lube. Most likely a synthetic lube that can handle a harsher work environment because of the load that may be on this product. Now here we get into an oil bath. Very messy. Very messy. You had to change that chain, you might as well have a couple pair of gloves and better bring a stack of rags. But they're ensuring that it stays lubed. Now generally it wouldn't be cast on like that. A lot of would actually have little pulsers on that it had a real fine nozzle and shoot just a small drop at a time. Now, let's see if they have it.
Seems like it'd be better to just have the bottom of that keel just rub against the oil bath instead of spraying it around.
You want me to know, I'll tell you why they don't do it. You know what the term rooster tail means?
No, but from the looks of it, that's contained, it won't flow too far.
Well, that's what's going to happen. If I dip this in here, and this is probably, the way this looks is rotating this way. If it's turning at any velocity at all, it's going to catch it and throw it out here, depending on how this guard is.
That looks contained, so.
It looks contained, but a lot of times they're not. They're not contained as tight as what this kind of allows you to believe. Most of the time, this guard, it only encompasses 3 sides, and then there's a back plane it goes up against. all right?
And if you've ever seen a jet boat, racing boat, you know, go down the water and it leaves that tail of water up in the air, that's called rooster tail.
Are any of us rednecks that are out in the woods, and we got in two-wheel drive and we stomp the gas to the floor, all that mud's flying out the back, and it's kind of leaving a nice pattern out across the back. Another example of rooster tailing. Ride the bicycle in the rain, motorcycle in the rain, don't want to be the one on the back.
I'll have to check when I get home, but I believe my Harley's clutch is actually a little bad.
Some are, but that's contained.
Mm-hmm.
And yours is probably, like Dalton indicated. Now, to answer your questions, there are some four-stroke engines that it dips the gear into for the timing and other to lubricate. So it is a dip, or they'll have slingers, what they call slingers in there that actually make contact and splash it up. There's another method of lubricating this that can be used, and that's where they take a piece of felt and they wick it. They have this come up and dripping oil onto the felt. And then as the felt rubs the chain, it transfers right off the felt onto the chain. It minimizes the amount of rooster tailing it affects. Isn't that right, Mr. Kelly? Yeah. When you're smiling that much, you're not looking at lubrication. Huh? Good observation on my part, huh? As long as you're supposing, I'm supposing too. All right. Now, shock between mating components. That happens a lot when they got gear-to-gear timing. And that's the reason lubrication becomes very important. It actually adds a certain degree of absorption to that impact. Liquid lubricants. They're the most versatile and best known lubricants are in liquid form. Liquid lubricants include all types of oils as shown in Figure 6. Liquids are ideal for use in most mechanical and hydraulic applications, which leads me to share about State Chemical, not that I'm trying to push any certain company. They have a spray lube called Invisalube. All right. But what they did was by mixing a alcohol-based or methanol-based solvent with a lubrication, they could spray this lube on the chains and other areas. It would penetrate, and within minutes, all the alcohol evaporates, and it's left with almost like Vaseline lubrication. Stuff worked excellent for chains. You had a chain that was rusted and it didn't want to work correctly, it would be hanging up and almost looked like a lot of TPs going across. Spray it down, after a couple laps, loosens right up.
Is that rusted? If it's rusted through.
One, you're correct, but there was a lot of times we didn't have the spare chains or they didn't want to allow the equipment to go down, and you're going through trying to catch up on deals that other people hadn't performed correctly. They were reactive instead of proactive. So, again, there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of different lubricants that are very beneficial and can make our job a whole lot nicer. Semi-solid lubricants, you get into your greases. All right. Then you get into solid lubricants and gas lubricants. There's a bunch of dry film lubricants out there. Molybdenum is one of the ones that comes to mind. Graphite. And there's another thing. Back in the day when you had just straight 30-weight grease or 30-weight motor oil, you had detergent and non-detergent. Do you remember that? Oh, and for you guys that can remember, I'm cleaning this garage out of this house I bought. I found an old oil spout that went in the old metal top cans where you had to plunge in it. Yep. For you younger whippersnappers, as Granddad always called them, you have no clue what I'm talking about. You're used to the cans of oil that you always turn the lid off of and poured it, right?
Yep.
Well, they used to make cans that had cardboard sides and a metal top and bottom. Well, the only way to get the oil out was to use a spout that had, it literally cut the hole in the can as you pushed down on it, and it sealed itself the way it inserted in, and then you poured the oil out. They'd always drip some, there's always some mess.
It was like the can that the Tin Man had in the Wizard of Oz.
No, that's an oiler. That's what he poured the oil out of to put it into his tin on the Wizard of Oz. Nice try though, Jeff.
You can say the same thing.
I'll tell you what, I'll bring the oil spout in so y'all can see it. I just don't have any cans to, I don't even know.
Nah, they're hard to find. I mean, you find them, but people.
Well, they actually, how many go to Cracker Barrel to eat? If you look around in Cracker Barrel, you'll see the cans are about this tall, they're about that big around. Hey, one quart of oil, and the sides is cylindrical cardboard, a coated cardboard with a metal top and bottom that was actually crimped to the cardboard. And trust me, if you didn't push that top in correctly, you would kink the side, oh, the mess was just to happen. They sold millions.
So did Pet Rock Company.
And people bought them.
There's no wire.
Yeah. All right. So now the other thing to take into account, additives. And I was getting ready to say that, and here it comes up. They got foaming inhibitors in a lot of places. You see it, especially in transmissions. For the automatic transmission, that fluid that's in there has a foaming inhibitor because with the pressure and the volume that moves through there, foaming can happen very easily, especially inside the torque converter. Isn't that right, Mr. Kelly? So another additive that you may be would be in that differential loop you're talking about. So if I had a posi rear in the back of my vehicle, there's clutches in there. For that, you know what a posi rear is, right? Everybody know what I'm talking about? Posi rear means both wheels are going to spin unless it's making a turn.
Okay.
And then you hear a ratcheting effect, or you'll get a clunking feel when those clutches are releasing, so you can turn the vehicle. And if you had a mini spool or spool in the back, there is no, the inside tire is going to spin faster and leave a mark when it turns. Because it's basically like having a solid axle across the differential.
Okay, gotcha.
For those racing gurus that are in here, we can attest to that. But if you had a locking differential, there was an additive you put in there just for the clutches, so they can function. And if you fail to put the additive in, you get a whole lot of jumping and jerking when you try to make a turn. You can hear that clutch actually grabbing when the vehicle turned. All right? There's oxidation inhibitor additives. There's so many additives that happens in all, even in gasoline as well as your lubrication, your lubricants. And everybody remember, for those that are of the younger nature, you heard of lead gas, all right? Because now it's all unleaded. Well, the reason they had lead in gas to begin with wasn't to poison you, it's for lubrication. So when they went away from, good answer. When they went away from lead and gas, they actually had to go to hardened valve seats because valves were sticking and actually welding into the valve seats. All right? That lead was in there just to prevent that from happening in the old engines. Learn something today? Something you probably forget tomorrow, right?
Probably.
All right, let's talk about it. All right, viscosity index is improved additives. So now we're getting into where we're actually checking and having consistency with oils that are sold. Because that's the one thing about viscosity. They have to make sure there's consistency so that regardless of what you're working on, and you go to use a certain type or certain viscosity oil, you have the same lubrication properties each time that it is applied. Because as you can imagine, back in the day, every company wanted to make their own oil with their own additives, and at the end of the day, some settled and you had to shake the can up before you used it. Some you didn't. Others, it would be so thick that when you poured it out, you was lucky if you had any lubrication properties at all when it finished. Again, and here's another lubricator that they come up with. It's a drip. You actually fill the canister up, let it drip. Well, if the gear stopped, it just continued to drip. Kind of a mess, isn't it? Here's a collection plate. So there's your, and that's actually, I've seen that used.
Cross back onto the field too.
And here's that slinger. Remember I was telling you about the slinger? There's your just oil bath. Here's another. Now, the one injector we had for the Richard Wilcox chain that we had overhead conveyor, it actually had 8 nozzles, and it would hit 4 links and all connecting pieces, and it was timed where it hit right on the joints each time it passed through. And then you could have it turn on for a certain amount of laps of the conveyor, or you had a mechanical pump that actually, as the wheels went by, would lift the little spring-loaded arm up, and then when that dropped back down, it pumped grease into the joints. So there was nothing electrical, it was all mechanical. So if you wanted to lube, you flipped the lever, it released that actuator to come down, so as every time the wheels went by, it would lift this mechanical flap, spring-loaded, so as long as something lifted it, it was pumping lubrication. You flipped the lever back, it held it up, didn't lube anything. So you'd fill the tank up, you'd go over, you'd wait for it to do 2 or 3 laps. It was lubed, it was good for your shift and go on to the next day. Here they're actually got an electrical pump that's pumping it up and it drips back down. Now we're looking at our different refineries and our oil wells, and there's the barrel that cost you your firstborn child.
Cost about that much, huh? Actually, it dropped a little bit now, but it's going back up.
They want to get you used to it so they can shoot it off to 5.
Well, they got their, Maryland just passed, they just passed 75-cent tax on gas. It's supposed to, it's gonna slowly go, but it's gonna end up being 75 cents more.
And what politician
But that's the best question is why?
Then again, companies could sell
Yeah, why?
$5 a gallon if they wanted to, as long.
Don't forget, $2 a barrel, isn't that how cheap drilling it now?
Something like 180 a barrel.
No, he's talking about what it actually cost them to get it a barrel. I mean, if I'm drilling, what's it cost me in my labor? My total overhead, what's it cost me, my real cost?
It costs very much to drill if you're getting billions of gallons.
Yeah.
Wow.
National Geographic Saudi Arabia when it gave us the gas, selling for around 60 cents a gallon now.
Well, just to share with you, a friend of mine was from Egypt. Back before he left Egypt to come to the States, they would actually wash their fire trucks and everything with gasoline because it was cheaper to wash with gasoline than it was water in Egypt.
Wash your car with gas.
You'll fire.
Just about to put a cigarette on the way out by, right?
No, seriously, it was cheaper to buy gas because gasoline was, 10 to 15 cents a gallon for them in the middle of these oil well regions. It was cheaper to take and use. Well, back in the day, you got all the real road grime off your vehicle with gasoline.
So what did they put their fires out with?
Well, that's when they had to pump out the
That's a catch-22. What do you do when you catch a fire truck on fire?
Get more fire trucks. And also clean the gas.
you just have a whole lot of happy firefighters because now they got something to work on. There's your viscosity gauge. As we go over the different uses of it, I'm going to try to get on through here. There's some terminology. But you get the idea, guys. I mean, here we're getting into different viscosities, different types of lube, and the additives associated therewith. And all this is on Blackboard. All right? Are we good? All right, see you all Thursday then. No, he left right at 4. You have to sign up for it. Thank you, sir. If you signed up, I think we take care of the paperwork. Or you gotta take it to the company you're gonna work for, is that what they're asking? Get with us. I'll get with him and then we'll try to email it to you, or send us both an email to remind us. Well, let them know that that's something that we're working on. And we'll have available here shortly. All right? And if they want, they can feel free to contact us. Is that fair enough?
Yep.
Who's Chick-fil-A Cup? I'm gonna have to fire Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.